Hello and welcome to the Gooner. Back again with you guys for another show, for another episode of our TGT series. He says, as he forgets to put the mic right by his mouth. Classic professionality as always. I hope you can hear me good and clearly now. Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk. Back again with you guys for another show, for another one of our phone-in series. One of my favourite shows to do on the channel specifically. Mainly because I love hearing kind of different views and opinions as always. And one of the biggest reasons why we do this show is to get different varying opinions on different topics. And so earlier on today, I put a tweet out and a couple of messages on Instagram and YouTube as well to try to get people on who were interested in kind of putting forth the point of view or rather that they are very much kind of against the idea of Edu remaining as technical director of the club after a summer in which we've obviously spent £150 million. Yet we currently sit bottom of the Premier League after 3 games, having lost to Brentford, Chelsea and Manchester City. And so we're going to chat to a few people today that have certainly got that point of view. And I ask them some questions and see if they still feel that way at the end, and see if I still feel the way that I do. And I'm probably best idea if I kind of lay out where my head is at. It's very much on the fence right now. I sit in a place where I see the good stuff, I see the negative stuff, and I'm not yet sure whether or not there's enough evidence for me to suggest that a right decision would be to move Edu on in this specific moment, which is different from my view of the manager, because I feel that right now would be a good moment to probably move the coach on and change coach to move forwards. But I'm not sure I feel the same way about Edu. And there are lots of reasons as to why, which will probably come up in this specific interview. Did I just make up a word, Tom? I may have done. Professionality that's definitely not a word, is it? But just, being professional is probably the better way to say it. Tebow in the chat says, we need to see how our new players settle in and perform. That goes for Edu and Arteta. Sacking them now would be quite a bit like sending them back to Christmas presents without opening them. Now, it's a good point that obviously we haven't yet to see the fulfilling of those kind of people within the club. But at the same time, what if you need to jump before you see what that is, because what that might be is not what we're expecting. Sometimes you have to preemptively strike, and it could be one of those moments. I'd love to know your thoughts in the chat box if you are joining us. Do you think that Edu should stay in the job or not? But let's bring in our first caller of the day. I'm very happy to be joined by Zed. How you doing, mate? Are you well? Are you good?
I'm good, Tom. How are you?
Yes, very good. Now, Zed, I'm absolutely delighted that you came on the show, because you've done one thing that a lot of people choose not to do. And obviously, you were in the chat box yesterday with me and Harry. And obviously, you disagree with a lot with what Harry said, which is absolutely fine. But you've actually, you stepped forward, you got the front to come on the channel and have discuss your points of view. And I can tell you, you're in a very small percentage of people that would do that. So welcome to the channel. And I'm going to start, obviously, by asking you what your position on Edu is and why you feel that way.
All right. So basically, I'm not the type of person who likes to jump into the whole debate of Arteta in, Arteta out, Edu in, Edu out. I feel it's become more of an obsession between us fans to make their point stand out in something that we don't have control in. But I am mainly Kroenke out, and Kroenke employs Edu. And how could I want Edu to stay if Kroenke is the person that employed him? Now, listening to the interview, the recent interview of Edu, I gave him benefit of the doubt, to try to believe or trust what he's saying, but I don't buy any of it. And I felt most of what he's saying is pressure coming from above. And this is what worries me. It's like KSE is telling him, we want this, and he's following through. For example, why the sudden change in transfer policy? Last year, we signed Willian and Cedric. Did they just realize in 1 year that their whole transfer policy was wrong? That's worrying in itself. Are they learning so quickly? So that in itself worries me, like the sudden change in transfer policies. Number two, the things he says, like, I want to see the team together. Okay, we did miss some of the signings that we signed this summer, but weren't the players that played against City, against Chelsea, mostly part of the team as well? That's around 70% or 80% of the team. So how can he disregard all the players that played against Chelsea, against City, against Brentford. It's a weak argument, and this is something that worries me. The mistakes on the pitch, getting out jumped by Gundogan. This has nothing to do with signings. So I understand Edu's point of view. And I understand the policy they're going through. They want to sign players who are not inexperienced, 22, 23, 24-year-old players who have good value, who might work out and raise in value, which is going to be good business for the club and for the team. And at the same time, if they don't work out, we don't lose totally, because they'll still be 25, 26, where we can sell them on for some type of money. That's great. But at the same time, football is not that complicated. We've known from the history, the perfect mix for teams that succeed is experience and youth. You have to have a correct balance. How long are we going to wait for this project to succeed? We don't have any guarantees. We can wait 1 year, we can wait 2 years, we can wait 3 years. And then after 3 years, we might say, oh, the players we got weren't as good as we thought they were. The thing is, where are we going? What is the, are we never going to compete with the bigger teams? People are saying we spent the most in the transfer window. This doesn't mean anything. We haven't been spending. If you look in the past 20 years, we have so many gaps in the team. For Xhaka, Holding, Chambers, we had, who was the third? Kolasinac. They're all players from the Wenger era still. This shows you how long we have to build. Like Chelsea and all these teams who keep on talking about net spend, the reason why they have a good net spend, which I really hate, is because they've been purchasing players 10 years ago they could sell on for a profit that we never used to do. So it's not about, it's about what do we want to do now? Are we trying to play catch up? Like for me, at the end of the day, 150 million, we spent around 50 million. Okay, so what? Why didn't we get another world-class central midfielder? Okay, Xhaka is very, very easily gets yellow cards, very easily gets red cards. I've never been his fan, but fine, I don't mind him being a squad player. Lokonga, Sambi is still inexperienced, okay? El Neni was a 6 or 7 million valued player that Wenger signed, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
and our fourth player is Thomas Partey, who unfortunately suddenly keeps on getting injured. Why go into another season with a squad this weak? Do they want us to wait till next year and they try to sell Xhaka on and get another world-class central midfielder? We have the African nations coming up. Partey and then you are going. Who are we going to depend on? Xhaka and Sambi? So they want us to be patient, and Ed was playing the whole patience. It's a project. We'll see what happens. But I don't buy it. I feel it's more he's trying to save his own. They're under pressure clearly because they came out with this whole interview to start with, and I don't buy it at all. Like saying things like, now we have Xhaka, and that's why we signed Lokonga as backup for Xhaka and Partey. Like, it's obvious that they were trying to offload Xhaka a couple of weeks ago. They are totally lost. And for me, honestly, I don't buy any of it. I felt the interview was full of excuses. At the end of the day, whoever comes in, whether it's Edu or any person in the world, it all comes from the top. It's KSE, the strategy they put in place, or they're hoping to buy time with, and this is unfortunately what we are suffering with. And that's why, going back to your question, sorry,
no, it's fine.
Going back to your question, I can't say I'm Edu in. I just can't.
Oh, that's interesting that you finished off by saying that you can't say that you're Edu in. Do you think there is, by saying that, is not being Edu in, you must be Edu out? Because I'm not either. I'm very much on the fence with Edu right now. I think you raised some really good points regarding kind of the excuses that he brought up during the interviews. I don't agree with that. I think we had more than enough of the team available to say, put in a performance against Brentford. I thought we played in certain ways against Chelsea and City that we practically gave them the win. We could have played with different players, different team selection. I think you talked, interestingly, one of the points you brought up about how you feel like the transfer window has switched, or the strategy has kind of flipped, which you mentioned right at the start. Now, that for me, ironically, I look at in a different way. So Arsenal have continuously over the last 10 years made mistakes in the market. I think we can both agree with that. We've made ridiculous mistakes with the players that we brought in, the amount we've spent on certain players, and the types of players that we brought in. Now, at the start of Edu's tenure, that looked like it was continuing in a sense, although there were some positive lights. But Raul Sanya, he was there. Gabriel Martinelli came in. Kieran Tierney came in. Pepe came in. The expense we put down on Pepe and David Luiz is not the type of kind of business that Arsenal were really needing to do in those moments. You go to 2020 and the Willian signing and the Alex Runarsson signing are pointed out as big mistakes. What I would say, though, is that if they've switched it, do you not think there's a possibility that that shows growth in the sense that they've identified the mistakes they've made previously and now they're changing that by signing players with genuine sell-on value that are rated very highly and rated by plenty of other people, and they've spent enough money to then improve the squad with those players that have come in?
Two things. Number one, it worries me that somebody in such senior positions for Arsenal Football Club have to realize these things so late. Number two, football, players need to gel with each other. And the key thing is for players to gel with each other. Now, we got all these 22, 23-year-old players. Once they start gelling together and developing, Thomas Partey is going to be 31, 32. Xhaka's leaving as well very soon. The only person in our central midfield who's probably going to be around while these defenders that we got are going to start to peak is Lokonga. So we're still going to be going through change in the next 3 to 4 years. How long are we going to? Doesn't make sense. Like,
so what would you do different? Is the question. Is what do we do differently?
Honestly, keep like what they did. I'm happy with what they did. I'm not going to criticize any of the players that we signed because I think most of the people on social media think they are football managers and we can't make judgments without seeing them on the pitch. Okay, I'm not going to criticize any of the players, whether it's Ben White, even Tavares, who I'm really doubtful about.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I'm still not going to judge him. Okay, but it's good. We're adding depth. But why didn't they just finish off instead of spending 150? I know I'm gonna want them to spend more and more and more. But I mean, it's clear what we needed. We needed a world-class central midfielder, and we needed a world-class forward or winger forward attacker, something like that, to juice up our creative side and our attack. We needed just to give the whole team a lift. None of the players that we signed is going to lift the team. It's like as if they said, okay, we reached our target of 150 million for this summer, which is maybe their limit, and then they're like, we'll wait till next year, maybe then we will be able to sell off Xhaka finally, we'll have another 100 million and then we will add that. But it's a whole nother season. You're wasting another season for all the Arsenal fans in the world. We've wasted 10 seasons already. It's so
I'm not sure that the season's wasted. I see a lot of people turn around and say like, this season's a write-off, and I use that term gets thrown around a lot because we've invested in necessarily players that are quite young and they're going to have to develop and stuff. I wouldn't describe it as a write-off or that we're wasting a season, because if we are going to change tact in the market, if we are going to change the way in which we want to approach our signings and bring in, say, young players that are going to develop and have got sell-on value, it is going to take them time to improve. And I don't think there's anyone, to be honest, Zed, that could come in saying to that technical director, say if we sacked Edu today, and you brought in someone else, and that's a separate discussion in itself, is who you would bring in instead. But I don't think anyone in this scenario can wave their wand and be like, look, we're going to make 2 signings, and that's going to turn Arsenal into a top 4 contender. Because if we didn't do what we did this summer, the following summer, say in 2022, if we'd have just added, say, a quality midfielder, which I agree with you, we definitely need, and a quality forward, which I think we need, but it's tricky when you've got 2 experienced strikers at the club already that you can't really sell. That makes it harder. I think next summer when Lacazette leaves and we've got that space, there's definitely the opportunity to bring in a top striker. I would have chosen right back as a real area to go with a real quality player in that right back position. But when you think about this year, we needed to spend that money in the way that we've spent it, and we were going to need to see this team improve over the next season, so that maybe in 2022 we've got the opportunity then to add that central midfielder that we could have done and the striker that we definitely then will need.
sorry to interrupt you, but
No,
the
that's
thing
fine.
is,
Go on, mate.
usually players, when they come to a new club, their journey in the club, the culture they get used to, the mentality they get used to is from day one. If they start from day one on a losing streak or under pressure, because suddenly Xhaka has a red card and misses 3 games, and El Neni and Thomas Partey are in the African nations, and we're depending on 21-year-old Lokonga.
Yep.
We're going back into the losing habit again, and the pressure of the new players are going to experience a negative experience from day one. It has to be a positive buzz for the whole club from day one, and the club had the opportunity to do that restart this summer. They didn't. They missed out. For me, this what killed it was the central midfield. I can even ignore.
Yeah, I agree. 100% agree with you on the midfield. Just to interject you briefly, because I think I don't want to get caught on this one point of the central midfield, because I think it's key that we
You're
don't.
right.
Because I don't think the missing out on a central midfielder is a sackable offence. I think that we've got, when you look at what we have with Partey, we've brought in Lokonga, which was a central midfielder. You've got, say, Charlie Patino coming through as back. I'm not suggesting that he becomes part of the first team squad, but say you've got that young player, you've got Aziz that's gone on loan. If you were to say add a young player there, that would have been a problem for those young guys. But we renewed Granit Xhaka, which you at the start said that you were happy with to do as a squad player. As a squad player specifically, but if you keep Granit Xhaka happily as a squad player and you want to bring in another midfielder on top of that, I think that then blocks the route of those youngsters. What I would have suggested is get Xhaka out the door and bring in a central midfielder.
No, I would love Xhaka out of the door. I've wanted Xhaka out of the door for more than 5 years now. But honestly, the thing is, I have nothing against the. No, actually, I do. I think he cracks under pressure. And the day he threw the armband on the floor and told the fans to, for me, that proved his character. He's not somebody who can lead you to glory. He's unfortunately slow. I think he will be perfect in the Italian league. He's a great passer of the ball. He's a fighter, but not somebody who works with us. I was saying if we did sign a world-class player alongside Thomas Partey, I would have been very happy to have Lokonga and Xhaka as their backups. That's what I'm saying. But going back to your main point, Edu, I just don't like. I felt he wasn't honest. I like honesty, the fact that we didn't see the team, the whole. We're not going to target top 4. We're not going to target top 6. We're not going to even target top 10. I know his psychology is basically he doesn't want to add more pressure to the team and he wants to get out of this whole negative. But this is not the way to say it. We are Arsenal Football Club. At least say something like we're going to try the best we can to finish the highest or something. Yeah. But what he's saying is lowering the standards again. It's back to top 4 is a trophy. This is the same thing, but even lower. We don't care where we finish. What does it mean we don't care where we finish?
I agree with you completely on the comments in the interview. It was frankly embarrassing at times to see them not commit to a target. And I wrote today about that specifically, that to not put us into a place where we've got a measuring stick against our season. It just eliminates all accountability.
It's saying I know how bad we are and we have to accept it.
Yeah.
That's what he's saying.
So where we come through to kind of finish discussion before we get the next caller on, some wary of the time. The ultimate question is if we're not Edu in and say you're leaning more towards the side of thinking he should go, is who comes in that's different? And you started this off by saying that KSE are the main problem. What guarantee is there that the person who comes in is going to be, one, the right choice, and secondly, is going to say or do anything different?
Honestly, I know I don't care who comes in. For me, it's all about the strategy from the top. I just don't like Edu because I feel he's been, I don't know if brainwashed is the right word. Especially from this interview, I felt he's 100%. He's taking a salary. What else could he do? He has to obey KSE's demands. You know what I'm saying? But at the same time, he's not going to stand up and say, you know what, we need to do this because we want to compete today. But I just don't like this type of person who follows demands. Maybe people who have a stronger personality and stronger demands didn't agree to join our club. This is the thing. And I that's why I think KSE played a genius move by appointing Arteta, because he's an emotionally linked individual with our club. He has no experience and he has no demands because he has no experience. He has less demands. If from the beginning we went for a bigger character, somebody with demands and ambition, he would have said, I want A, B, C, D in the transfer market so I can put Arsenal back on the top where we are. So it's all the same thing. I see Arteta, Edu, everybody's following the new amazing genius ideas that we keep coming up with. Why don't other clubs come up with genius ideas that they have to wait for 2 to 3 years for the results? I understand some clubs are owned by other states and stuff like
Sure.
that. But look at Leicester. Vardy is 30 years old.
Liverpool.
Liverpool. When they buy players, like the Saints players they bought. Van Dijk from Celtic, experience from Celtic. Mane and Southampton, and they always buy players who are proven, even if they have to spend a bit more. It's not just about money and resale value. And now this is what's worrying me, and this is what I see. Nothing guarantees for us that this project is going to work. That's all I can say.
Absolutely, mate. I think you've raised a lot of good points, some of which I agree, some of which I think we've discussed and debated really well. So thank you, Zed, for your time. I really appreciate it. And I'm sure you'll come back on soon. Enjoy your rest of the evening, mate. Have a good one.
Take care.
See you later. A massive thank you to Zed. Again, Zed joined us yesterday in the chat box with myself and Harry and was not in agreement with what we said. And he's taken the time to come on today and explain a lot of his points, which I have absolute respect for. So fair play to him and thank you to Zed. Let's bring on our next guest of the day. Let's bring on Trevan. How you doing, mate? Are you well?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, very good, mate. Very good. I'm sure you were just listening in there with myself and Zed. Talk to me about where you are with Edu right now.
Right. So, I mean, if I can sort of articulate it correctly, I mean, I'll make an attempt to sort of come up with some quantifiable, let's say.
Very quickly, Trevan, just cut in. There's a bit of background noise on your end, and it's unfortunately music, and I'm concerned about getting copyright strikes. Is there any way of you turning that off? That's the only thing I'm concerned about. I've muted you for the moment just because I've got background noise. It's music. What I'll do is I'm gonna just kick you out quickly. Come back in, see if you can get rid of the background noise. Okay, sweet. Thanks, mate. Just gonna see if we can get Trevan back in a second. Hopefully you can. If it's his neighbours, he can't control it, and we won't be able to get him back in. Let's go into the chat box though and see what you guys are saying, because I want to categorically know from you guys whether or not you would like to see Edu stay or go. And if you don't want to see him stay, then you need to let me know your reasons as to why. It's the main thing. It's all well and good just going, I want Edu out, but I want to know your reasons specifically. So let us know in the chat box. Let's go to Tebow says, at least Edu thinks top 10 is doable, which is more than what a large part of the fan base thinks we will achieve. Lalietia says it's a lack of guarantees, i.e. uncertainty in the results, which is a great point. Let's go to Raptors, who says no point of any new manager or technical director as long as owners don't change versus can't buy a Madison, a Martinez or Basuma together. Steve Stone says, I confess I'm all over the place mentally with Edu and the window. Some parts of the interview annoyed me, but being honest, there was a large amount which I thought was a sensible, realistic approach. Ramsey says, you have no guarantees in football. I feel like some fans just want to be negative. Javier says, my gut tells me he needs to get the sack, but my brain thinks Kroenke is sticking with Edu and Arteta unless we stay at the bottom of the table. Let's go to Sahil, who says, to be fair to the guy, much of what he said was misinterpreted due to his lack of language skills. I'm obviously talking about Edu there. There is obviously always going to be part of that which comes into things and the not translation, but just in which how he's able to portray what he wants to say in English. But I think that we were able, Sahil, to get quite a good idea of the situation from what he said. Trevan, give me a thumbs up behind the scenes if you think we're good to go. If not, we'll carry on going through some of the comments. Hopefully you can tell me in a second. Matt says, Edu for me has done an okay job. Only the selling side has let him down. Kevin says, I find Edu signings were, but what can he do when no clubs want to buy players? Oh, I see what you mean. Yes. Kevin, I agree with you. What can you do if you have loads of players that clubs don't want to buy? Trevan, are we ready? Are we ready for a thumbs up? Can you give me a thumbs up if you're ready in the chat box? It doesn't look like he's ready yet. We'll give it a few more seconds. Sovik says, until Kroenke leaves, it doesn't matter who the director is. Kroenke will just bring in another yes man. And Hovik, you've hit the nail on the head for me. And the thing that we always talk about with these debates is that we don't know whether the right choice will be made. Trevan, we're going to bring you back in. Let's try a second time lucky. How are we doing, mate? Are you well? Are you good? Oh, that's perfect. There's no noise. Love it. Oh, brilliant stuff. How are you doing, mate? Are you well?
I'm good. I'm good. Sorry.
Good stuff. Right. So let's get to it. Talk to me about your position on Edu,
Sure.
why you don't want him at the club anymore, and explain your reasons.
Right. Like, I mean, as I said when I messaged you about it, I'm not entirely Edu out. It's more like I'm not convinced if he's the right person for us to go forward. But I'm willing to give him time in the sense that if the signings that he has made, if they sort of work out, then I'll sort of make a conclusive decision on whether he was the right person or not. I mean, to just give a quick sort of, let's say, tangible number, if you actually look at all the players that he has signed so far, that's Pablo Mari, Cedric, Renison Willian, Thomas Partey, Gabriel. That's 6, and then plus 6 this window, so that's 12.
Yep.
And if you make a sort of, I don't know, like thumbs up, thumbs down on those transfers, it comes to something like I don't know, just above, I would say 50%, something like that.
It's tricky to do this season, isn't it? Because obviously we haven't really seen them play. The ones that we have seen play, we've seen Ben White play one game, so we're pretty in between on that one. Sambi Lokonga, I think, is impressed in the 2 games that he's played so far. Again, Tavares, we've barely seen play. I thought he played quite well against West Brom in the game he played in the League Cup, but that was against West Brom's reserves. You've then got Erdegaard, who we know over the last 6 months. I like Erdegaard. I think he brings a good extra creativity to the team, and for 30 million quid, I thought that was quite a good deal. You go back to the last summer, as you pointed out, Willian, solid thumbs down. I think we can all agree on that. Willian, solid thumbs down. Runnison, again, solid thumbs down. Pablo Mari, the thing about Pablo Mari is it's a weird one for me, that one, because he's had a really poor start to this season. But last season, I don't think you would have been. I think you would have struggled to find many people that would have said that he wasn't a bad backup to Gabriel, which is what he has been for us. So
in fact, he was ahead of Gabriel.
Exactly. Arguably, he's closer to a thumbs up as a signing for what, 5 million quid or whatever it was. That
people were saying to play Gabriel and Pablo Mari. People were like, you can play 2 left centre backs. Yeah,
absolutely. This is weird. This is a debate, and we're agreeing with each other. Cedric, absolutely awful signing. Didn't like that at all. Didn't like the fact there was the Kia Jarabchin links with him as well. That's all fine. But when we're having a debate about Edu, Trevan, is just the key thing for me is that if he goes, who comes in for you, and what are they going to do differently? It's a tough one, isn't it?
It is. I'm just looking at what options do we have. Just a quick, I would say, like a follow-up point to Edu. The problem is, the reason why Edu doesn't give me that confidence is that I'll make a segue to which sporting directors that are available that I want to. He doesn't give me that nerd, statistically good sporting director, if that makes sense.
I think so.
It could probably be because he was an ex-player, so he doesn't give me that sort of
experienced vibe.
Yeah, a very sort of statistically knowledgeable sort of thing. He people who, like, when you're in a classroom, they're cool by association. So when Edu says things like we are moving towards a statistical approach to our signings and stuff like that, how much is he invested? Like, this is a bit harsh, but if I were to sit with Edu and then if I ask him to do something like, hey, can you tell me what XG is in layman terms? Will he be able to do it? Maybe he would. I don't know. But
does that make a good For me, when I look at a technical director, what I want from a technical director is someone that knows the philosophy of the strategy that he wants to implement in the club. He's consistent with it. If they make mistakes, he corrects those mistakes. He has the clout and the front to make tough decisions, maybe like sacking a coach when they need to. And I mean, what of the signings that he makes, they're successful and that they work. And I think we've talked about a little bit earlier on, like some of the signings have worked and some of the signings look like it could be really good signings and some of the signings definitely haven't worked. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I mean this in the most respectful way possible. I'm not sure I care if he knows about a player's XG. Like, you know what I mean? I get what you're saying, but I think he'll have people to know that stuff, won't he?
Correct. But I'm sorry, maybe I didn't phrase it properly. What I meant that I'm not saying he should know about it, but what I meant to say is he should have a holistic understanding. Like it's about having contacts, a good I don't know, eye for talent, where you look at someone and you know they're good, plus all the aspects. So the problem is he doesn't give me that holistic, that he's the holistic person that is going to be a success in all those aspects. So I mean, I want Michael Edwards. So that's where I was heading.
And that's fine. This is what I want to hear, mate, is I want to hear people telling me who they want. Now, why is it that you want Michael Edwards?
So one thing, connected to what I said, he does give me the nerdy vibe. I like
this nerdy vibe thing.
I'm a PhD scholar working in physics, so yeah, I guess I have.
I did physics at A level, and I was horrible at it, so I'm not going to try and go well.
So one of the things is like he is someone who has a very a proven track record of signing good players. I mean, it's his record speaks for himself. Spurs did the most Spursy thing, let him go ages back. Considering his just caliber, his track record, the fact that the same holistic thing that I was talking about. This is not someone who just goes only by stats, right? He has done both sides. He has bought players where they've been statistically good in some sense. He has taken, I would say, risks. Like I would say, Wijnaldum and Robertson were slight risks, right? Yeah. There wasn't a precedent. When I hear people like, "Oh, look at Liverpool, they bought best players from teams they got relegated, blah blah blah." What was the example before them, right? So, and even if someone did buy, did someone sort of perform to the level that they did? So he has literally sent a sort of a pioneering benchmark to pull off really gutso deals like that. But then he has also done the no-nonsense thing of, I don't care about this player's, numbers, blah, 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 aerial duels, blah, blah, blah. This is good. I'm going to pay the money and I'm going to get him. That's Van Dijk. You don't sit and do a statistical analysis of Van Dijk, right? I mean, you can, but the point that I'm saying is he bought someone based on his performance in the Premier League. So he has done sort of this sort of holistic type of transfers where he has done the under 24 age thing of buying players. He has bought players where they are the best player in the team that has got relegated. He has done the no-nonsense of, I'm not going to worry too much about the statistics. I'm just going to buy. So there is this huge spectrum of talents that he has bought, and he has sort of proven it. I would have still go with Michael Edwards, even if Liverpool hadn't won the Premier League or the Champions League, because I think those signings would still be there. Because I don't want to sound like, we need to get him because he was in a team that won the Champions League and Premier League.
No, of course, no. Trevan, of all, I've had a lot of discussions about Edu and who should replace him and stuff, and you're one of the first people to actually genuinely bring up a legit argument for someone else. So that's one of the first we've had from that, and you put across the argument really well. I need to move on to our next guest, Trevan, but thank you ever so much for coming on. I appreciate your time, and I appreciate you coming on for a debate. Really appreciate it, mate.
Sure. Yeah.
No worries, mate. Have a good one. See you later. Let's bring on our next guest. You may have seen him before. It's Igal. How you doing, mate? Are you well?
I'm doing good, man. How you doing? Nice to see you smiling.
I know. It's because Arsenal aren't playing this weekend. That's probably why, mate. That's probably. Just very quickly, Yanis in the chat, thank you so much for the super chat, mate. Really appreciate it. It says Edu is being honest, unlike Wenger, who used to tell us that we were going to compete for every title every year. I wanted Edu out before this window, but not now. He had to work with what we have. Interesting that this window made you turn your mind in that sense, Yanis. That's very different to I know a lot of people. Unlike Igal. Igal, I know that you're not the biggest fan of Edu right now, and I think you'd probably rather see him move on. Give me your reasons as to why.
I'm just going to start from a perspective that I think a lot of people didn't touch on. A lot of people spoke about many things that I would have already say. So let me start with things that haven't been mentioned. One thing, when Edu was brought in, he was brought in by Raul Sinelli, who was at the time steering the ship in conjunction with Vinay. Now, I don't think Vinay had that big of a part. I don't know how big of a role Vinay had in the signing of Edu. But when Edu was brought to the club, Raul's exact words, I have it here in front of me. So we are excited that Edu is joining the team. He's experienced in his knowledge of football, and he spoke about how he's already worked. He's a true Arsenal man. That's what he said. And when you talk about it, he's talking about the fact that he's played at the club before, and he's worked at Corinthians, and he's worked with Brazil. Now, in my opinion, that is fine. When he comes in, it makes sense because you have somebody who's senior to him in Raul Sinelli, who's been in the game, who's done it before. And I'm not too worried about experience. I'm not too worried about him getting outwitted by other people who've been in the game for longer. These things are not concerns for me at that moment. But now, after Raul Sinelli has parted ways with the club, let me say it in the nicest way possible, after he's parted ways with the club, and you still have Edu here, you have to wonder, why is it that the man who hired him has left, but you still feel like the person who is understudy is fit to lead and do the job when he's never done it before and he has no one guiding him? You have, now that you have Richard Garlick coming in, I don't think Richard Garlick has that big of a part to do what Edu does when it comes to recruiting and scouting of players. Yeah, and when we let go of a lot of scouts, to a certain degree, that makes sense. But when it comes down to what Edu's job is, and it's to identify talents, help sort out who should be leaving the squad and who should be coming into the squad, identifying problem areas, identifying players who are no longer good enough to play for us or have underachieved to a level where we need to move on from them. I don't think he's done that. And he's incapable of getting actual fees for any of our players because of the situation we're in. So I understand that. I don't hold him accountable for everything, but I look at both scenarios and I say to myself, if the person who hired him is no longer here and that was guiding him, and he's basically steering the ship in conjunction with two other people who are also inexperienced in their positions, in Arteta and Vinay, we're in a situation where we have not hired the right people. And that now goes back to the Cronkies not hiring the right people from down, and just goes to trickle effect. So from Cronkies not hiring the right CEO, and for not having a good replacement in for Arsene Wenger as a coach. When we got Emery, the people who hired Emery are no longer here, in Sven Mislintat, Raul Sinelli, and Ivan Gazidis. As much as we don't like Ivan Gazidis for his time at Arsenal, he was more capable of getting things done than the guys that we have in place right now. As much as we did not see what Sinelli could do, he did identify players like Sionchu instead of players that we have signed. So he was hamstrung by Raul, and Raul leaving, just that whole trio's gone. And now we are left with a whole bunch of people who have never done the job. And that's the main reason why I look at Edu and I say to myself, his experience in the role and the people above him mismanaging the role and allowing him to be in a position which he should not be in.
Obviously, there's a lot of points that you brought up there. Let's try and break through some of them. Let me focus on the sales part first. So I just need to gauge, because you said a couple of things that went against each other. Do you think that you said that he's been incapable of selling players, and then you followed that up by saying that you understand the situation? So I just need to clarify it. Is that something that goes against him or not because of the scenario?
No, I mentioned it, but at the same time I caveated and said I understand the situation, so I don't fully hold that against him.
But do you hold any of it against him?
I hold this against him. Why is it that we are not selling individuals that we deem are no longer good or no longer part of our future plans, like Granit Xhaka. Why have we kept Granit Xhaka?
Would you have accepted £9 million from Roma for Granit Xhaka?
Honestly, I feel like it is a bad offer. I do feel like it is a bad offer, but at this point, he's not part of our plans going forward. We're trying to build a team for the future with the players that we're bringing in. And as you can see, we were linked to some good midfielders that would have been upgrades. I personally feel like it would have been a situation where maybe we should have bite the bullet and just move on. But at the same time, I get where it's coming from. I get why we kept him, but I feel like that's one of the biggest mistakes we made this transfer window, giving Granit Xhaka a 2-year extension and keeping him. He's not a leader in this team. He's supposed to be a leader. He's supposed to be one of the most senior players in this team, Tom. And he's shown that he's a liability in the sense that when people are looking at him to lead, he's the first person to lose his head and get a red card. Or obviously it doesn't happen every game, but he does get punished harshly.
So you don't need to convince me that Xhaka should have moved on. Xhaka should have been moved on, absolutely, and I agree with you. The thing about that situation with that sole example, and I think it is the sole example of a player that should have been moved on or that we didn't accept a fee for, I'm not sure that you can accept a £9 million figure for a player that is, and whatever we think of the guy, was a first team player for us every single season, had a really good European. If we'd accepted a £9 million bid for Roma, the perception that is already of Arsenal that we are awful at selling as a club would, for me, only get worse. Now, the mistake that we made was extending his contract, which was something we didn't have to do because we activated a clause in his current contract in order to do that. And secondly, we still, because we know of the bids that we made for other players like Manuel Locatelli, for instance, even though we were planning on investing in other areas, and that all came after we'd already spent £50 million in White, we could have invested in another centre midfielder this summer. We could have brought in a Basuma on top of that. That's the criticism I have of Edu for the window, is the central midfield area. What I would say is that the selling side of things, I really struggle with the whole concept of how do you sell a player that no one wants? And I have a lot of sympathy for Edu, not just because of the pandemic situation, but we have a lot of rubbish in this club. And I say that I was about to say with any respect, but there's not really much respect in saying there's a lot of rubbish in the team. But there's a lot of surplus deadwood players in this team. Yeah. And to sell them is almost impossible. So how do you do it?
Let me tell you, my solution is what they've been doing to a certain degree is smart, because they were bringing in a lot of backups who can push the first team players to make them play better, or they can subsequently replace them in the future, and they could take their spots. Like a Lokonga could be coming in as an understudy and work his way into a starter role. I like that. I like some of the things that they're doing. Don't get me wrong, Tom. I'm not one of these people who just say everything they've done is unbelievable.
You are. I'm just trying to pick apart some of the things you're saying.
I said a lot of negatives. I just want to balance out the conversation.
No, that's fine.
Right?
Let's talk about something else that you talked about. Let's talk about specifically kind of what needs to be done differently. Oh yeah, go on. Let's talk about the Raul part. The Raul part's interesting because
how do you feel about that?
The Raul thing's really weird because let's face it, publicly, we don't know the real reason why he's no longer at Arsenal, but we are led to believe that there are allegedly some pretty dodgy things that have gone on. Now, I can't legitimately say that's the specific reason, but it is strange that he was quote unquote sacked by the club. Now, Arsenal don't tend to do that. Like, we don't tend to sack people. It's not part of it. And especially for someone that invested £72 million in Pepe, which, you know, there's allegations about that whole situation, £27 million in William Saliba's deal as well. And there's some things there's some weird stuff with that deal as well. Look, I think that Raul Sanllehi was the right decision was to move him on. I think it was one of the worst things we ever did in bringing Raul Sanllehi into the club, to be honest. The way in which we went down an agent-driven approach to Arsenal right off the bat was an awful decision. I mean, originally, he's the kind of one that links us in with Kia Jarabchin, and then Edu, who has his own links to Kia Jarabchin too. So you've bred that situation further. I think that you were spot on in the sense that when Arsene Wenger left, we dealt with that situation. I say we, the Cronkies dealt with that situation horrifically. But the thing about Edu, and I want to make sure that we don't go off on too much of a tangent. The thing about Edu for me is that he's identified in the last 2 summers some key things that needed improving. We needed last summer a centre midfielder, and we had done for about 10 years. We needed a centre back, and we needed one for a good 10 years as well. And he brought in Thomas Partey, who he usurped Arteta's judgment of going for Houssem Aouar instead, which looks like an absolute nailed-on right decision out of those two now. And Gabriel, who was obviously a much more improved player on what we've got defensively. And then you fast forward to 2021, he's recognised that we've got an ageing squad in certain positions. Yes, we've got some great kids coming through, but the old guys that are in the senior part of the squad, they let us down last year. Massively so. And we've really been rubbish, as you say, at selling. So let's invest some money in some young guys that are going to keep their value so that if they're, say, not good enough, like a Tavares we see isn't good enough in a couple of years, we can sell him for as much, or if not more, as what we bought him for, because he'll only be 23 in 2 years' time. The thing that he missed, and I think we've already covered it, is that he should have added a bit of balance by bringing in a quality centre midfielder. But that, I don't think that alone is a sackable offence. I think that's something that he's shown he'll learn from, and maybe in 2022 he can bring someone in. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Do you know what is a sackable offence, though? In my opinion, out of everything that he's done this whole time, to me, I look at this team and I say to myself, how are we getting prepared for the window? How are we addressing our issues? And how are we going about our business in the window? I feel like what the sackable offense from this window is, we wasted our time on targets that were never going to come to us. And when we did have actual realistic targets like James Maddison, we would get so close, but we would then get away from our targets. If we have a first choice target in James Maddison and Odegaard becomes available for 35 million, we just go straight back to Odegaard. I completely get what you're saying. I understand that, but when it comes down to it, we first bidded for Buendia. Buendia was maybe our first choice. Then we heard Odegaard have always been our first choice from numerous sources. Then the person we were willing to bid the most money for is James Maddison. So if we're willing to bid the most money for James Maddison and we bid for Buendia before we even bid for Odegaard, I'm sorry, but these reports about Odegaard being our number one target is a little bit of a media spin, I feel like. I don't feel like it's honest. And I feel like they wasted their time spending time on a Locatelli transfer that was never going to happen. They wasted their time speaking to Buendia when they knew that they weren't going to go over a certain budget for Buendia. They should have just walked away immediately. They wasted their time in the James Maddison transfer because Leicester said 60 million, we get to the table. We bid 50 million. We bid a player swap deal. We keep doing these things. We waited around for Camavinga. Was never going to come to us if we weren't. But we tried to wait for the opportunity. There's so many things we could have just done. We went to Brighton, spent 50 million on Ben White. I did not think we needed a center back. Personally, I've been on here before. I said that. When we signed him, I've gotten around to it. But if we were going to go to Brighton, we should have at least seen the opportunity to get in Bissouma for maybe 10 million more than what Lokonga cost. I get Lokonga is a good talent for the future, but why not bring in somebody who pushes your first team? These things that he's done this window, some of it I agree with, some of them I don't agree with. There's a lot of things that I'm saying right now. But the main thing that I feel like is a sackable offense, he's wasting our time, wasting moments that we need, and we need to act fast because we don't have the money, we don't have the clout because we're not in Europe and we're not in the Champions League to get these players like a Varane, like these guys that Manchester United and Chelsea are scooping up for easy money.
Let's go through some of them points. No, no. So let's break it apart. Let's focus in on the attacking midfield stuff first. So to give you my understanding of what happened this summer from everything that we've read and from stuff that I've heard, Ødegaard was the number one from the start. At the end of the season, Arteta wants Ødegaard. Edu wants. They both want Ødegaard. The problem is with the Ødegaard situation is that his priority personally is he was going back to Real Madrid. That was always his number one option, and that's what he wanted to do. And so at the start of pre-season, where they didn't have a manager initially, he went back with the intentions of going back to play for Real Madrid. Partway through the summer, quite early on in the summer, Carlo Ancelotti comes in, and Ødegaard is still getting some opportunities in pre-season at this point. And Arsenal are given let's cover the first part. During the period where Ødegaard was saying that he wants to return to Real Madrid, that's when Aston Villa suddenly publicly, we saw very pushed heavily for Emi Buendia. So if you're Arsenal and your number one target is outright saying as a response is that I'm going back to Real Madrid and I'm going to go and play there. If your next target, Emi Buendia, is suddenly being bidded for by another team, I'm not surprised that Arsenal went and bidded for him. They were too late. They didn't get him. Aston Villa are putting a lot of groundwork over the last 6 months to get that deal done. That falls away. So Arsenal then have to go, right, we've missed out on Buendia, whatever happens. Ødegaard could still happen, but he's telling us no at the moment. So the next target they look at is James Maddison. Now, I disagree with you that the amount of money that you place on a player doesn't put them as your priority. James Maddison is valued at a much higher level in terms of money than Martin Ødegaard because, one, he's another Premier League player, two, he's English, and three, I've got that Premier League experience that's there already. And Leicester do not sell cheaply. Let's be real. And when they do sell, you see them go for ridiculous fees. So if Arsenal were ever going to get to the table with Maddison, when at that time they still didn't think Ødegaard was a possibility, they're going to go and try and get whatever deal they can. That didn't happen. They didn't want to pay over the odds for Maddison. They weren't willing to go as high as what I hear was about £70 million, what Leicester wanted minimum. And that's coming from speaking to Rob Tanner from The Athletic, their Leicester correspondent. That's the amount of money we're talking about for Maddison, not 60 million. They wanted upwards of 70 million to get even talk about a deal. And so when that Maddison thing starts to trickle away because we've tried to offer up the likes of Ainsley Maitland-Niles and Joe Willock, and they've not taken any of that bait because they're not interested in those players. And then all of a sudden, at the same time, Martin Ødegaard's chances at Real Madrid aren't coming to the fore. Carlo Ancelotti's starting to liken the idea of Isco a little bit, or Isco a little bit more. That's when Arsenal suddenly go, right, Ødegaard was our number one target right at the start of the window. Originally, he wasn't available to us. So we've gone for two other targets, and they both haven't worked out. Now, our number one target is available. He's possibly open to coming to Arsenal. We're going to go and bid for him, and they got him. I wouldn't criticise Edu for wasting time throughout that period. I think they actually followed a pretty standard way of going through player targets, in my opinion, from what I've heard from that. So I'll let you respond.
What about the Locatelli transfer target?
You're spot on with that.
This
is yeah, absolutely. This is where I'm happy to talk about things in separate cases. The attacking midfield, I think they sorted that out spot on. Central midfield, from what it looked like at the start, was that Granit Xhaka was courting with Roma, and we know the deal with that situation. So the Arsenal have gone and drawn up a list of centre midfielders that they want to get. Bissouma is on that list. They were interested in Bissouma. Locatelli is on that list. And from what we're led to believe by initially Brazilian media, but I'm not too sure that it was that legit, is that Bruno Guimaraes was another option on the table, as was Ruben Neves, according to the Times or the Telegraph, one of them two. They're the kind of players that are on Arsenal's list. Then what happened is that their number one was clearly Locatelli, because we know that we bidded for him. And that was a weird scenario, because from what we're led to believe, we bidded, and Sassuolo technically kind of accepted it, because they kind of said that, look, that's the amount of money we want. We want 40 million euros. If you want Locatelli, you've got to pay that price. Locatelli's not interested in coming to Arsenal. Now, I think what the mistake that Edu made was that he was banking on Juventus giving up. He was banking on them turning around going, look, no, we're not going to spend 40 million euros. And in the end, they didn't even have to, because they got him on a 2-year loan deal with an obligation to buy at the end of it, which for Sassuolo, you look at that and you go, what is going on there? Because that's ridiculous. But yeah, I agree with you. They wasted time on that, but then they decided to renew, which was the other mistake, Granit Xhaka's situation in the midfield. I also think during this time, Lokonga was impressing massively in pre-season. And of course, we've seen from his Premier League performances too, that he obviously impressed so much in the Premier League that they thought they don't need to go for another centre midfielder. I disagree. I think we should have gone for a Bissouma still during that window. But that alone is still not enough for me to say he should go. Go on.
Are you concerned about his experience only being in Brazil and with the Brazil national team? Because that is a major concern. Yeah, and the fact that the guy who hired him, we spoke about that, is no longer here. And that was supposed to be his stewardship, and he was supposed to be like his senior looking over him in these negotiations and everything. That is a major, major concern, because we go into transfers and we go into negotiations, and it's either we pay over the odds or we don't get close enough to their valuation, and we don't seem to be able to negotiate a way down to meet in the middle. And that is a worry.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's another point to say that Arsenal, when's the last time that Arsenal beat another team to a transfer target? I can't remember. The last time that happened. The thing is for me, maybe Napoli, but we beat Napoli to transfer targets every year. But like in regards to kind of why I can't jump off the fence like you have already, Igal, is because the thing about Edu is I am concerned about his inexperience. I am concerned about some of the mistakes that have been made. However, I've been calling for Arsenal to sign a centre-back and a centre midfielder for years. And in the last 2 summers, we've brought in Gabriel and Ben White for a combined amount of just under 80 million quid. And we brought in Partey and Lokonga for a combined amount of about 60 million quid. And so we've spent 140 million pounds on what I believe to be 4 quality additions in those 2 key positions. I've also been asking Arsenal to change the way they recruit for ages in regards to kind of sell-on value of players. How many times have we brought in the likes of Mustafis and Socrateses that are just not going to give you any sort of kind of longevity and no genuine guarantee of real quality? But Arsenal have gone out this summer and they've spent money on 6 players that are all 23 years of age and under. And I think they could have added, as you say, a Basuma or a Locatelli or someone else to add to the midfield. But I can't jump off the fence and say Edu deserves to be sacked when he's doing things like I've highlighted there that are genuinely much better than we've seen. The biggest issue for me is always going to be the owners. And second to that, it's now the manager, because I think the manager's got a team that's capable of doing a lot more than it currently is. And I don't think it's fair to Edu, despite I disagree with a lot of what he said in those interviews. And I think actually he was trying to cover up for his mate Arteta during a lot of it. But I think Arteta is failing to implement the philosophy and the style and the plan that Edu is actually putting into place with the signings that he's making in the window. And that's why I can't jump off the fence.
Okay, it's not that I'm jumping off the fence. I personally was never... honestly, I thought Edu always was, the plan was to bring in somebody as an understudy to help him, like a Sinelli or like some like Campos or somebody, like you even said the other day on your stream, Michael Richards, who used to work for Chelsea, somebody who has done it before, who can come work in conjunction with them as a team or as a unit. Because right now, having Vinay running the club, who has worked his way up from being an oil trader, being part of the foundation, working way up, being 11 years at the club. Big up to him for working his way up to the top. But I don't think he has any experience at any other football club to draw from to say he should be in that position. And he should be making decisions to hire managers or anybody who's working at the club. You probably would say the same thing when it comes to that.
I agree, but again, that's not Edu, is it? Like the whole thing is about should Edu stay or go, and I'm saying he should stay. Vinay, I agree. Arteta, I agree. The Cronkies, I agree. All of them, get them gone. But Edu for me is doing some good things at Arsenal that we've not seen in the last 10 years, and so I can't. Go on.
But the things he's doing is basic things. It's not like he's pulling out miracles.
I've done those things in so long. That's like I'm happy with basic, Igal. I'm happy with basic because we've been awful. Basic is better than awful.
I get that. I get that.
We need to do the basics. I'm getting really on. I'm sorry. I'm getting. I don't usually get like this.
I get that you're happy with some of the things that he's doing, Tom, and that it's things that we would be doing. But you know what? We also would be signing a midfielder. We also would have been looking to replace one of Lacazette or Aubameyang this summer. We also understand that maybe that's a target for next summer. Yeah. But we always are missing one item. This summer, I did not think we were going to sign 6 players. But you know what I feel like? I feel like we signed 6 players who in needed positions, but somehow the window is still just an average window. Unfortunately, even though we've signed 6 players, it's a 5 out of 10 for me.
I think that you're asking for perfection. I think you're asking for perfection when in football that doesn't necessarily exist. If you look at Manchester United this summer, brought in Sancho, Varane, Ronaldo, great window. What are their fans saying? We need a central midfielder. Chelsea have brought in Romelu Lukaku, one of the best strikers there, and Sal Niguez on a loan deal. What are they saying? We desperately needed a centre-back. Like, there is always going to be that key position that a club is looking at that they won't get in a window. And when you think about it, United have spent less than us. Chelsea spent less than us. We've spent a lot of money that we've had to spend because of the mistakes we've made over the last 10 years. I don't think Arsenal were ever, realistically, without being able to sell a hell of a lot more players than we did, ever realistically expected to sign everything that we needed to in one window. I just don't think it was possible. I just don't think it's possible.
That is true. But one thing we could have done is, we could since we've put a lot of players out on loan with obligations to buy, maybe a lot of that money can come in next summer, and I won't be complaining. But if a lot of these loans don't work out and the obligations and the obligation to buy don't get the options to buy don't get triggered, we're going to be in the same situation next summer. And we're going to have a lot of these players that we thought we shifted on in Hector Bellerin, in Torreira, in not Guendouzi, obviously, because Guendouzi does have an obligation to buy, I think, right?
Yeah, he's gone.
Or So Guendouzi's gone. Leno's going to still be an issue next summer, but we've already addressed the goalkeeper situation. We're going to need another goalkeeper. All these things that are happening, we're kicking it down the can, and we're going to have similar situation next summer where we're going to need to address 4 to 5 positions again. And it's just like, I feel like, Tom, we're in the same circle every single year. I get gassed. We all get gassed. We win a couple games. We get happy. And then at the end of the season, I feel like it's the same thing. A lot of teams around us have caught up to us in the level of recruitment that they've done, such as a Leicester. And people are even talking about Aston Villa in the same sentence as Arsenal.
That's not Edu's fault, is it? That's not Edu's fault.
As the main guy who's recruiting the squad, identifying, we see the issues, Tom. And we're not hired to do anything about it. So they should be able to see the issues.
This is my argument. He is doing stuff. All that stuff I just said to you about what he did in 2020 and what he's done in 2021, he is doing stuff. But the thing is, he's doing it in an environment where he's got a very inexperienced coach putting his ideas into place. He's got an ownership that won't invest. All the money that we've spent is from our own club. And he's got a CEO at the club that is as inexperienced in his role as anyone else at the club. So... But Edu is the only one I can see doing some good things. That's the issue I have.
Here's my solution. If you're saying get rid of Arteta and you're saying get rid of and you're not saying get rid of Edu, then get in a manager who can work in conjunction with him, who's done it before in Ragnick. Ralf Ragnick is a manager who has worked in that similar role to him, and he'll be able to work in conjunction with him. If you get somebody like that who's a little bit more senior and knows what he's doing, Edu will have less of a task on himself, and I'll understand that. And if you're saying, you know what, some people are saying they don't want to lose the manager or Edu, in that case, Vina has to go, and you need to bring in somebody from that level who knows everything about the game and who can run the whole ship. I'm okay with some solutions. I'm not saying Edu has to be, I'm not saying get him out as soon as possible, all that stuff. I'm saying, you know what? I can see that he's a major issue in the role that he has. He has delivered on some things, but we have not seen the fruits of his labors. Maybe 10 years' time, some of these players he brought in will be part of a team that gets us back to the Champions League and wins us trophies. But right now, I have the jury's still out on Edu, and Absolutely. A lot of people will be on my side and on your side. But I have seen enough evidence from what I've seen to say that he is part of the issue.
Yeah, look, Rangnick, first of all, like, if you told me that Arteta's going and Rangnick's coming in tomorrow, I'm absolutely buzzing with that at the end of the day. But he's just taken a job at Lokomotiv Moscow, so I don't think he's going to go anywhere. The thing about Rangnick as well is that, look, I want a club that his experience and his success came at RB Leipzig, which is a club that is completely built upon during his tenure there, buying very young gems of play. I mean, he introduced the under-23 rule, as far as I'm aware. He was very much there when they introduced that rule that they would not sign a player over the age of 23. I mean, we've just been calling out our Arsenal to bring in balance and to bring in some senior world-class players. I'm not sure if Rangnick would have been the guy to do that. I don't know how he would have got on at Arsenal, because it's a completely different club to RB Leipzig and run a completely different way in a league where you would act very differently. But I think he's got more experience than Arteta, and so I think he would be a better choice than Arteta. The thing for me is that if I because I feel now I'm so more towards the idea of changing coach, because I just think that the players that we've got are so much, or the sum of our parts is so much better than what we're seeing right now, and that is always going to fall on the coach. Always going to fall on the coach when the team's not performing to the level it should do. Is that idly looking to bring in someone that can get the best, the absolute best from the players at their disposal. We know that Antonio Conte is a coach that does that. It's just a case of, I don't know whether he'd be convinced to come to Arsenal, because I don't think we've got an ownership that would sell him a project or an ambition or would give him the money that he needs. And so, again, that doesn't fall on Edu, that falls on KSE. And so the two issues, again, that I feel like we've talked about there aren't necessarily falling up towards Edu as the issue.
I need to push back for a second.
Go for it. I've only got 5 minutes, by the way, so you got to be quick.
Okay, sorry. You said two things. One, you got to look at where Klopp came from and look at what he's doing at Liverpool. He came from a place. He came from a place where they take young players and they try to develop them for sell-on clauses, and similar situation to Ralf Rangnick. Also, you're talking about spending. at Liverpool, does he get that type of investment before he got that Coutinho sale? If you get players and you build them up to a certain level, you can sell them on. And we always talk. You just talked about earlier sell on value, but now you're saying you don't want somebody with sell on value. I'm sorry, I'm not making fun
What
of
do you
you.
mean? No, hold on. Let's go back on that. What do you mean? I'd say I want balance.
Earlier, we spoke about 23-year-olds being signed this summer who possibly have sell-on value.
Yeah.
But when you're bringing in Ralph Ragnick, one of his criticisms to you is he's worked at clubs that they do that. So wouldn't you want that to a certain degree?
He only does that. So I want to see players brought in with sell-on value, but there needs to be balance, Igal. You need to bring in, say, the one key upgrade, the world-class addition, in addition to 3 or 4 players with the sell-on value. We did the complete opposite of that at Arsenal for, say, 10 years, where we didn't invest correctly. We brought in players that had no sell-on value at all. So the thing about the criticism of Rangnick, and when you bring up Dortmund are a different run club to RB Leipzig. Yes, you're right in which they do sign young players that improve and they get better and they sell them on for big money because Dortmund can't compete with Premier League teams or the 2 big Spanish clubs or Bayern Munich, so they sell them on. But if you look at the business that Dortmund still do, they still buy key experienced players like Axel Witsel. They bring back the likes of Mats Hummels. They bring in those key figures that are still going to make that group gel together. So Klopp had both experience and strong youth at that side. I would have loved if we'd have brought in Jurgen Klopp. I think Dortmund is a much better model to look at for Arsenal because I think that model suits us much better. I was kind of weirdly critical of Thomas Tuchel at the time because I thought he was too fractious with the coaches and with the ownership and all of that. And I'm not sure whether it worked at Arsenal, but I think I look back on that and go, no, I was probably wrong about Thomas Tuchel, and he probably could have done a lot better than Arsenal. Lucien Favre, that then came in after him, really struggled in the end at Dortmund. He wasn't able to go forwards and do what he did at Nice because it's a very different scenario. And now, of course, they've got Marco Rose, who came in from Borussia Mönchengladbach, who the jury is out on, and we'll see. Maybe Marco Rose could be someone that Arsenal look to target in the future. We'll have to wait and see. But the RB Leipzig Dortmund, there are very big differences between those 2 clubs, if you know what I mean.
I 100% agree with you. I understand they're 2 completely different clubs. But when I say, but sometimes when we say one thing, it doesn't necessarily mean if you do a job one way. It doesn't necessarily mean when you're given the assets and the ability to do it at a bigger level that you're not going to be able to do that. Just look at some of the biggest signings in the Premier League over the recent years. They like Mo Salah. He was at Rome to a certain degree. People be like, "Oh, he's only done it in Italy. He didn't do it in the Prem." He signs for Liverpool, catches light. It doesn't mean that. But you know what? I would love to be back on another time to have more conversations.
Oh, yeah. This has been great, Igal. Look, at the end of the day, I think what we've demonstrated to the chat box is that, look, me and Igal don't agree on a point. We've come across our own different views, and we're not pulling each other's hair out at the end of it. It's unfortunately, because I'm restricted for time, I would have gone on a lot longer. But it's, for me, as I've said, and my point very much.
Next time there's a...
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I'll drop you a message.
You need to bring me on next time.
I always just come back to the point where I can't put the blame of where we're at on Edu from some of the stuff that he's changed, and that's why I can't. I'm not saying he's perfect. He's made mistakes, as have a lot of people in those positions. But if you're going to talk about getting rid of people, he just isn't one of the first people I point the finger at. That's kind of where I'm at. And you're not in that case. You would move on to go and get someone else in, which is absolutely fine. It's the whole point of this is about having different opinions and different views and discussing it. But Igal, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on, as it always is. We always have a good chat and a good discussion. I appreciate it, mate. Give yourself a shout out and tell people where they can find you.
Hey guys, you guys can find me on Twitter at @thekidEG on Twitter, and you can find me on my YouTube channel EGTV. I also talk about Arsenal and some other sports here and there.
There you go. And we'll be back a little bit later on this evening. I'll be joining the boys from the Arsenal Lounge, Shahin and Liv, at 8 o'clock. So make sure you join in for that. I'll see you again very, very soon. Drop a like on the video, subscribe if you're new, and as always, up the Arsenal.